with some that I came up with. I'm not even following my own rules. I'm talking over my music. Oh wait,
This is our new thing, guys. We hadn't done
so
something in a while.
we're looking at the iceberg, right? What are some things that you guys know are very obvious? What do you think? Very obvious things. You didn't discuss them, but I want you to share out, popcorn out. Obvious things. Physical traits. What else?
Appearance.
Appearance. What else?
Okay. Gender.
Gender. Yeah, that's usually pretty obvious, but nowadays it's becoming a little androgynous or something. Boy or a girl? I don't know. It's pretty interesting. What else? Let's see. What we see. So we hear. It's not just what we see. We hear the words they use. We evaluate their eye contact. Pretty much I've walked around the whole room and I felt like every one of you made eye contact with me. I hope it didn't make you feel awkward, but your facial expressions, we tend to show a lot of emotion, but in a lot of cultures, it's not accepted to show outward emotion. I remember one of our family vacations, we were in Dallas at a hotel, and a family, I'm not for sure exactly where they were from, but the lady wore the entire face and head and everything covered with a serape, or what is that called? Burqa. Burqa? Okay, whatever it is. And she got in a pool like that, with that entire clothing on. And my son, who was 3, we had to eventually, let's go to the other end. I was so fascinated. Why are you dressed like that? Why are you in the pool?
Sounds like the buzz baby.
Like, please.
I know. If only we could all wear those bathing suits.
So we understand their language. We understand the body language, right? Some show a lot. I'm not very good about hiding my emotions because it's very obvious. My son says, why do you look mad? I'm not mad, but tone of voice, I don't hide those well. My inflection, the way I talk. So I have to be very guarded to make sure that I'm very cautious with my words because my body language, that and the fact that I turn bright red, kind of give me away. So, yeah. All right. So things we don't see. What you don't see. Their history, right? The values that they have in their family. The motives of why they're doing certain things. And that's where we talk about the coming from poverty, coming from middle class, coming from wealth. That drives their motive. Their family history drives their motives. Their profession. If you looked at me, you might not guess what I do. You might think, oh, he's a nerd, but you might not guess. And I don't have a calculator, but I'll find one if you want. Just saying. I have good hearing, too.
Yes, good hearing.
Sorry, I couldn't resist. Emotional state.
Hot. You're turning red. What's happening?
Past experiences, assumptions, education, and biases. We don't see those. I'm sorry, I couldn't resist. I heard it like 15 times. You have a calculator. You have the calculator. So, all right? I'm sorry. So,
Oh, wait.
my question to you is this. Have you ever been the subject of a negative reaction based only on your membership in a group?
Yes.
How about a positive reaction for the same reason? Why do people have negative stereotypes about others? Hopefully, since we've discussed this all today, you should be able to answer that last one, right? So my question on this one, I will say that my brothers were not the very best behaved in school. And I had 3 of them. So I remember the worst experience I ever had, 7th grade, my reading teacher. That was when Miss Armstrong was my language arts teacher and Miss Mosley was my reading teacher.
I'm sorry.
She was this tall and the meanest thing I'd ever met.
Sounds like a reading
Different
teacher.
Miss
So,
Mosley.
but she told me, oh,
Oh, no.
you're a Dawson. Oh.
There's another one.
Well, first off, we're going to go ahead and move you to the front of the room right here. And I told her, I said, I'm not like them. I'm the good one. But I remember being highly offended that she assumed that since my last name, and I look like one of the ones that were totally, well, I was gonna say totally, but you're filming an ASS about certain things. Made it very difficult because he was the one that was right closest to my age. So, you know, I think some probably retired early because of it. So that made me very frustrated because I felt like I didn't even have a chance to establish who I was because there was a judgment already there. Does that make sense? So then I want you, anybody in here, is anybody, I shared mine, you share yours. Is anybody willing to share theirs about, go ahead.
I have the exact opposite. So I have an older sister who was like the smartest valedictorian, student council, so
Okay.
teachers expected that from me. And
Nope.
so yeah, it was,
Okay.
I guess, the expectation that I was going to be this awesome student.
Angel.
And I
You're a wild one.
let everyone know.
Yeah, I think there's a song for you
You
somewhere
have a
in there, right?
personality.
Yeah.
That's awesome. What else?
I had one.
Okay.
I went, this is back in the late 90s when Baylor football was not as good, and I was at an OU Baylor game, and an OU fan chewed me out for cheering for Baylor. And so I've had a negative reaction since then, and I almost have the same reaction to when I see OU people as well.
Wow.
Because they chewed me out. I was 16 and they made me cry.
This is a white people problem.
I'm a Longhorn, so I understand usually about that. I tell people they're doing that because they're trying to get out. You know? So I understand. What else? That's a
It's
great.
like white
Both.
privilege problems.
That's not much compassion, is it?
What else? Anyone? All right. Yes,
When
ma'am.
I first started working in the field, I've always worked with at-risk populations. Some of the youth and families that I would try to connect with would assume that because I was a professional and I had a degree, that school came easy to me, as well as everything else in my life was made easy for me, and that, of course, my parents went to school and everything else when that was so far from the truth of where I came from. So being able to share through that common struggle, I mean, just open doors for them, like blew things away, and then these kids are asking questions about, you know, well, could I, how can I, you know, let's talk about that, what are some options?
It's amazing, isn't it?
It's
I mean,
phenomenal.
and I won't
It's the best
I
thing
won't
to see them
capitalize the
employed today.
conversation, but that is, I've had so many opportunities to share my life that way.
Right.
I mean, it's amazing because they assume certain things, so. Yes, ma'am.
Mine is kind of strange because I was young, like Leah, I was like maybe 15, 16, no 16 because I had just started dating.
So like last year.
A couple years ago.
But this young man that I started dating, his mother had a problem with my mother, and so, you know, right away she just said no. And just crazy things, you know, my mother's passed and everything, but she right away, you know, was kind of like discriminating against me because she was a brother.
That's amazing. I know looking at, even in my office, there's times when people will say, I'm an Espanol, like to the front office, and they'll call me out of my office because I'll be the only one available. And I walk out and they're looking at me like, I said Spanish, okay? You know, but it's interesting because people have those assumptions. The other part of that being, when you talk about coming back from a background of that nature, there's many times that people have assumed just because they're Hispanic, that they don't have an ability, or they don't have an education, or they don't have certain things that we have, because I've seen the counterpart of that, and it makes me angry too. I also know I dated a girl named Estella, and her mama told me more than once I wasn't allowed to date her daughter. It was because I was white, and that her husband does not like that I'm dating her daughter. So, I mean, it's weird how we have these judgments, and the mom was concerned that since I was white, I was going to treat her daughter horribly. Isn't that weird? Because of other people's experiences with them. And so we know, just based upon who we are and what we are, a lot of times we're not given a chance to even show what we have to offer. And I think a lot of times the clients and the children that we serve and the families we serve feel that way because they've experienced it over and over and over. And so even though we're serving a diverse group, we have to find some way to reach out and show them it's okay that they're different, and it's okay that your parents had that experience, but this is not you. And when we talked about that agency earlier, of teaching them they own their future, the reason why we shared all this is I want you to know how valuable it is for anyone, because that's what happened to me. You know, I didn't repeat what my brothers did. My dad was 17, my mom was 16 when they got married. My dad graduated high school, my mom didn't graduate high school. And they went overseas because my dad graduated early and he went into war and all that kind of stuff. So I respect my father because of the choice of serving our country. And I respect my mother because she wanted to marry him and not see him go away and not come back, that kind of thing. Does that make sense? But it impacted their life forever. And people assumed, well, they were lazy, they didn't go to school or whatever. But when you think about and hear things about what my parents did, I respect it significantly. Does that make sense? Now, how about a positive reaction for the same reason?
I got grouped into like, oh, this girl understands me. It was a mom talking about her teenage daughter, just talking about the relationship that her daughter has with this boy, and it's okay that they're having sexual relations. Oh, that's okay. The real issue is that, you know, he's Hispanic, and that's just not okay. So, and my husband's Hispanic, and I have pictures of my office, and it's just really, I just was having like a really awkward moment there, and she's going a mile a minute, so the minutes pass to kind of bring it up, and I'm just sitting there going, oh my gosh, what is she going to do when she looks around my office and realizes like, oh, that's, you know, her husband and her son. That's interesting.
And her
Are
last
those your
name.
clients?
So she's thinking like I'm totally on her wavelength, and I'm like,
Oh my
yeah, I
gosh.
don't know if we're on the same wavelength about
Wow.
that, but that's okay.
What else? Anyone else? No, it's all bad. It's all bad. So one of the things too, similar to that, is I've had parents call or assume that because their kiddo got in trouble that it must be because we're racist. You know, because your kiddo, you're white and my child is Hispanic. And I had one mom who was screaming and hollering, I'm going to sue the district, I'm going to do this. And she sat down and we were discussing. And then for about 10 minutes I spoke in nothing but Spanish to her. And then she goes, okay, you speak more Spanish to me, I get your point, let's go. I'm over it, but I mean, there's just this pervasive, innate feeling that certain people have, and we have to find some way to get out of it. Because we will never move beyond someone's race and attaching it to a perceived cultural perception until we understand that race does not mean culture, and diversity is not just about race. Does that make sense? And we have to make that understanding.
And like you're talking about that, but sometimes we tap into, just by who we are, emotional things that people have gone through. So something like that was something that she experienced way before, and it's working your way through that.
Exactly. So here's talking about, we had 2 students just this past week who took their own lives. I have an aunt who took her life. And, you know, certain things that come up bring back your past. Does that make sense? And you haven't thought about it forever. I think you see this, I think you realize, oh my gosh, maybe I haven't dealt with it all the way I need to. And though my brother overdosed with heroin, it's thought that he took his life too. Does that make sense? So I have all these weird feelings when I experience that. And I can empathize with the children and the families because I know what my family went through to take care of all that. But I think a lot of times when we work through some of the struggles that our families are working through, we forget a lot of their behaviors are triggered because, like you said, those past experiences. And we don't understand, and that we take it, what? We make it about us, right? And we make it personal. And we have to move beyond that. So my question is, if you were to look at both of these people, just based upon what they look like or dislike, what's your number? And don't lie. And I don't expect you to answer out loud. It's just a rhetorical question, right? Okay.
That'd be awkward.
Please, ma'am, will you tell me what number?
Who do you like more?
Hit it on her. No, hit it on her. So, because of the world we look like, he and she look stereotypical because we have stereotypical or pre-assumed thoughts about them. What if he were a Baptist preacher? We wouldn't know that, would we? I have a guy who is a friend of mine. His child is in my Sunday school class. I'm the 7th grade youth pastor for Parish Baptist in Georgetown. He left his family because they were Muslim. His family disowned him because he is Christian now. And he decided that he would choose Christianity over his family. And yet, he has pictures that look very similar to that from his past. Does that make sense? And if he were to grow his hair or his beard like that and cut his hair, he might look almost exactly like that. And we would assume something by the outer appearance, right? Same with her. Very similar to what we saw at the swimming pool, except she had it over her face too. We make all these assumptions. And people, whether you like it or not, a lot of times, if you see them on the plane or wherever, you're like, oh, don't sit here, don't sit here, don't sit here, because you're uncomfortable with who that person is and you don't even know them, right? I'm just uncomfortable because they get in my space. You know, I want them to end, and I don't want your knee on my knee. And so when we think about this, my question then is this: would it be all right if your brother or sister married one of these? It's not a question I expect you to answer out loud. I just want you to think through. What about this? I want you to think in your head, and you don't have to share it out loud. Think about 2 things you believe about these people. Probably wouldn't be brave enough to say it now because we've had the conversations we've had, but I bet there's still assumptions about these people that we don't have the ability to verify, right? So when we go through this, that's that 90% that we were discussing. We have to think about this, that labels help us to identify. We know the contents of a can without looking inside, right? And we have labels and people. How are labels used to describe people? A lot of times inaccurately, right? But we rely on them. So our attitudes towards race, gender, and other diversity operate at 2 levels. We talked about this, we began with it, and then we're going to end with it, okay? It's our conscious, what we choose to believe. And then we have our unconscious, which is our immediate, automatic associations that tumble out before we've had time to think. You ever say something you wish you hadn't? That's my life. Just saying. My size 12 foot, you know, not in my mouth very easily. So when we think about this, I'm looking at my keyboard here. We're going to, this is weird for me, sorry. Where are you? There you are.
Which doll is the black doll?
You want to get the light, or can y'all see it?
And which one is the white doll? Which doll is the pretty doll? Which doll is the nice doll? Which doll is the bad doll? Which doll is the nice doll? And which doll is the bad doll? And why is that doll pretty?
Because she's white and he has 2 eyes.
Which doll is the ugly doll? Why is that doll ugly?
Because he's black.
Which doll looks most like you?
Me?
Yeah, which one looks like you?
And that one.
I just have to say she's supposed to be that cute. Okay, so that's not an old video. That's not an old video. Don't fall asleep on me because we're almost done. That's sadly pretty recent. So when we think about that, how old are they? How old were they?
4 or 5.
So where do you think that comes from then? How did they learn that? At 3, 4, and 5 years old.
Yeah, television,
Okay.
media, society.
Several things from their family.
So my challenge to you after we watch that, how are we going to make sure that the children you serve don't have that perception about who they are? Okay? So I asked you midways to think about your ahas and what we've learned and how that applies to us. And you have questions on the back of your evaluation sheet, and I want you to answer those, the rest of them. But more importantly, I want you to think about how what we talked about today can impact what you do tomorrow. Okay? Thank you for letting me work with you.
Yeah.